I'm grateful for the invitation to speak as part of this event in honor of the late Esther Vival, the company's founder. Hopefully, this celebration of Hispano-Filipino culture will remind us of our links to millions of people with whom we share a common past and some heritage, and perhaps now a common destiny with Socialist Cuba, the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, and Salvador Allende's Chile. I might mention here my visit to Cuba in 1980 when they published Rizal's novels, and I suspect there are many more Cubans who have read the novels in the original Spanish than Filipinos today. The first question I would like to respond concerns the impetus for my book. Well, we don't have to worry about Constantino's protest about venerating Rizal without understanding. Given our consumerist culture and commodification of almost everything, Rizal's sex life and sexuality have become somewhat of a respectable diversion in mass media, chismes, and academic chit-chat. Humberto Campos' popularization may perhaps be responsible for this. But anyone who has read the novels or known Maria Clara by hearsay may wonder why she was made a paragon of the virtuous Victorian lady given her parentage. Maria Clara is a chip in a parlor game or satiric label, but Sisa may not be so famous or notorious, although there is one movie on her and who knows how many theatrical melodramas. The representation of women or the female position in Rizal's writings may be a key to understanding Rizal's whole worldview, or if you like, the frame or model within which his idea of national liberation, or if you like, social transformation and the radical or revolutionary resonance may be appreciated. The role of Rizal's mother in his life cannot be underestimated, though like everything else, it has been mystified or even caricatured. Those who have looked at any number of Rizal biographies will recall that when the hero was 10 years old in 1871, his mother was charged with a crime and imprisoned for 2 years. She was forced to walk 58 kilometers or 50 kilometers from Calamba to the prison in Santa Cruz, Laguna. But the most painful, agonizing experience for Rizal was the whole family's eviction, a whole community in fact, from Calamba in 1890 and their exile to Hong Kong. The mother was punished again. If you will open your El Filibusterismo to the end of chapter 10, which may not be the same in this new edition that you are inaugurating, you will sense how terrible and traumatic that event was for Rizal. We know, of course, that the single historical event that changed Rizal's life was the 1872 execution of Burgos, Gomez, and Zamora, a year after the Paris Commune. The impact of that event, a communal event, was conveyed to him by his brother Paciano, which is why the Philly was dedicated to the three martyrs. And before Rizal left for Hong Kong, he wrote to his propagandista friends in Spain that the field of battle was no longer La Solidaridad, it was in the motherland, in Patria. As more evident in Rizal's letter to the women of Malolos, one can discern a form of maternal ideology tied to the conceptualization of the nation in Rizal, and others of his generation. So patria is a conceptual metaphor, to use the term popularized by cognitive science. The principles of the Liga Filipina, which Rizal initiated upon his return from Hong Kong, is the forerunner of the Katipunan, as everyone knows. Bonifacio, Mabini, and others were members. It aimed at the unity of all the colonized and their cooperation. Its aim was what we would call conscientization, to use Paulo Freire's term, the combination of reason and sentiments, of beliefs and practice, of all those engaged in mutual help and defense against violence and injustice. The ideal underlying the Liga, as well as in the character of Elias, Cabezang Tales, and so on, is what we would call the ethical substance of the people, or the folk, the Indios, the majority, the spirit of the people, not just the passion, the babaylans, or any single festival ceremony, but actually the repertoire of communal practices in the villages, which would be the basis for collective action. The German philosopher Hegel calls this Sittlichkeit, loosely translated customs of folkways. One can also call it practical reason of the whole community, displayed in the productive labor and creative activities of farmers, fishermen, workers, the whole sambayanan. Whatever pursuits each individual may follow, the enabling field of action remains always the social relations in which the person is inserted, whether he or she. So the whole, I'm talking about the social relations in which the person is inserted, whether he or she is conscious of it or not. Given the colonial oppression of the majority of natives during Rizal's time, Rizal analyzed the alienation pervading the whole society. He tried to discover the place where the freedom of the individual can begin to emerge in such characters as Filosofong Tasio, among the Etsapuera, Basilio, Isagani, Huli, and of course Sisa. Sisa's madness is one place, a symptom of lack, of the missing object of desire and possibilities. Sisa's predicament may be read as a metaphor for patria. For Rizal, the ethical substance of the people may begin from the consanguineal family and its affiliative relations. The ideals of the Enlightenment, which Rizal and his compatriots absorbed, Voltaire, Rousseau, Kant, the morality of duty and will, all those ideals cannot be actualized and become hegemonic, separate from the sentiments and practices found in the collective experience of the people, of folk. That is where the germinal roots of the nation people, or the national popular will, to borrow Gramsci, can be found, interpellating everyone to join in the common task of emancipation from colonial bondage. I forget that the whole generation of Rizal participated in the Freemasonry, and we're all familiar with the principles of deism, which also inspired the American Revolution. With the birth of women's liberation and feminism today, we need not remain naive and retrograde. In the figures of the oppressed Indios, in particular the women, the mothers like Sisa and her children, Cabezang Tales' family, including their wicked counterparts, Rizal symbolizes the suppressed universality of the people, the concrete universal inscribed in the organic praxis of ordinary life, which had been perpetually suppressed by church and state. In this context, SISA'S Vengeance, the title of my book, is not a literal attempt to punish her oppressors, but a figurative expression of a future settling of accounts, as it were, a release of the powerful energies of an entire population dammed up for centuries since Legazpi. The symptoms of such will to freedom, of course, can be seen in the local revolts from Soliman, Tamblot to Diego and Gabriela Silang to Dagoho and Apolinario de la Cruz down to the Katipunan. Almost one or two revolts every decade or so. So today, what has Rizal to offer to millennials and all the generations to come? We live in a time when individual wills, like atoms, collide in the liberal mass society of consumers. For some time now, the police and military dictate the parameters of action. The only evidence of a surviving ethical will, as everyone knows, is the community pantry, which has been red tagged or even quarantined and derided. Well, we can still argue over the Agoncillo-Constantino binary dualism of Bonifacio versus Rizal, the hypothesis of Cartesian dualism, which Senator Claro Recto at that time resolved this opposition by a synthesis in a lecture on the parallel lives of the two heroes. And I might mention here that I happened to attend that historic event in 1950 at the D&E restaurant when I was an undergraduate. Well, this whole complex of arguments will lead us back to the text and the concrete settings. I would propose that this debate should be adequately historicized, just as we contextualize Rizal's life, given the Cold War atmosphere in which Goncillo, Constantine, and Recto labored over this. But all of them, like Rizal, were responding to the imperatives of their particular circumstances. They adhered to the strict polarization of the issues instead of employing a dialectical or more flexible method of analysis. Rizal's vision of a nation based on the ethical substance of a community is not quite the civil society of NGOs contradistinguished to the state of political dynasties. This ethical substance has not been realized yet. We have a public sphere saturated by sectoral interests, devoid of empathy for the underclass, the poor, the majority who are marginalized. The utilitarian morality of a business society that we practice today, we absorbed from our colonizer, predominates. It is grafted to feudal patriarchal normative behavior, institutionalized in bureaucracy, schools, etc. Rizal's life and works offer a field of discourse for analysis, interpretation, and argument. Aside from the letter to the women of Malolos, the most useful writings, I've been asked which are the most useful writings, are of course the ones we are found in all the anthologies, such as On the Indolence of Filipinos, The Philippines a Century Hence, El Amor Patrio, Macamisa, and other satiric and polemical pieces. The two unpublished letters of Rizal, dated in June 1892 from Hong Kong, should supplement the Ultima Dios. Letters where Rizal affirmed that, quote, I have always loved my poor country, and I'm sure that I shall love her until death. Of course, the novels remain the chief arena for debate on its formal qualities, rhetorical effects, ambiguities, puzzles, audience reception. What this offers is basically attention to what we are as an evolving nation or community, a people with ethical substance on which the moral obligations of individuals can be founded. Some say we are still a neo-colonized polity, a dependent country. What do we want to aspire for as a genuinely sovereign nation? What principles and ideals embodying concrete universality will distinguish us as a nation among other nations? Perhaps discussing Rizal's life and work can provoke dialogue to counter the narcotic hegemony of neoliberal platitudes. The phenomenon of many versions of Rizal is not a surprising thing. No, we remember a film made by Del Mundo and Mike De Leon entitled Bayaning Third World. You also have the anarchist version of Rizal in Benedict Anderson's book Under Two Flags or Under Three Flags. Well, there will be many Rizals depending on the time we're living in. This is part of the struggle for hegemony, that is, for moral intellectual leadership of society by all the contending political forces. Lacking any single universal worldview, such as in the time of the Greek city-state or in the medieval Christendom, each group today in the modern world is embattled in seeking to impose its frame, paradigm, or worldview, if you like, on everyone. And we cannot avoid this. It presents a problem and an opportunity if we live in a democratic society where debate is allowed. We are today faced with the problem of constructing a feasible national identity given our utilitarian individualistic ethos. This is a problem. We are plunged in a political struggle to articulate our resolve. Rationality, in this case, is always embodied and located in specific times and places. In fact, this new edition of El Filibusterismo, I'm pretty sure, will inspire future arguments for a new revision of the Rizal canon, over which Agoncillo, Constantino, and their critics have spent precious time and energy. But times have changed. We no longer live in the time of Ritana, of Craig, Zaide, or in the milieu of Guerrero and Austin Coates with their Cold War mentality. Times have changed, including our hermeneutic tools for understanding and judgment. Today, we confront the crisis of disaster capitalism faced with catastrophic ecological upheavals and pandemics such as we are experiencing today. So our changed framework and agenda, if it is no longer the search for authentic national identity, will surely generate a new interpretation of Rizal and its significance for our evolving community as a concrete universal. And my little book is an attempt to contribute to this. Rizal might be hailed as the most durable spokesperson for racial egalitarianism, as he has been hailed by many Asian leaders, Nehru and Indonesian politicians. Rizal indeed was a spokesperson for racial egalitarianism, fighting for what Fanon called the wretched of the earth, for George Floyd and other victims of systemic racism and white supremacy. Indeed, if Rizal were alive, he would pen another prophetic, The Philippines a Century Hence, dating from this particular period. Maraming salamat at mabuhay sa inyong lahat ng katulong sa makasaysayang pagkakataong ito. Maraming salamat.